Hi, in this episode I'll be talking to Aron Arngrimsson about the Dirty Dozen expeditions. Over at BREW we chat about his educational trips to Chernobyl and the loosely named end-of-life trips to some of the world's most remote dream dive destinations. Do you fancy a brew? Yes, mate, there you are. Happy days.
I'm a total AV donkey. I have all this fancy equipment. I have no fucking idea how to use it.
So, Aron, welcome to Fancy a Brew podcast. If you want to give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself, let us know what's going on, and then we'll see where it goes.
Excellent. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Aron Arngrimsson. I'm the founder of the Dirty Dozen Expeditions, which is an expedition company that specializes in these kind of end-of-life experiences, whether you're going to the wonderful wrecks of merchant vessels in Truk Lagoon, if you're going to see the famous war wrecks that were sunk during nuclear tests in Bikini Atoll, if you're doing Galapagos, if you're doing Myanmar, if you're doing Chernobyl even, although that's not diving, it's a land-based trip.
Yeah.
I'm your guy. That's what I do for a living.
Awesome. Whereabouts are you in the world?
I'm calling you from Kiev, Ukraine. That's where I'm at the moment. I'm Icelandic by birth, and I left Iceland when I was 13 years old.
Yeah.
I was in Denmark for a few years, and ever since I graduated, I've just been on the road pretty much.
Nice.
But right now, me and my fiance, which is Ukrainian, we're both in Kiev. We just came after our last expedition in March into Suliani Airport. You know, they were taking our temperatures, and I think the following week the lockdown started. So
yeah,
we've firmly put our roots somewhere for a change.
Nice. Have you got a brew then? What are you drinking?
I'm just drinking our homemade coffee.
I've gone with gin. I've been at home quite a few hours today, so I've got quite a lot of my admin done. Lots of like emails and that answered. And I've just been drinking brew after brew, or tea after tea after tea. And I've had one
when
of
you
those...
said, bring a brew, I thought you meant coffee.
Yeah. Well, that's normally what I do. I think I've only ever had an alcoholic drink once before on this. But I went downstairs 10 minutes before we came on, and my wife said, do you want a gin? And I'm like, yeah, I flipping need one. I've had one of them days where everything's just sort of piled up, and I've not boiling point, but you just reached capacity, and maybe this little gin that I've got here might just calm me down a bit.
I mean, during COVID, I guess that capacity doesn't need to be that big anymore anyway.
No. Well, so speaking of the COVID dramas that we've all faced, have you been diving at all since your last exped in March?
So we came back from Myanmar in March. So I was very lucky to get some diving in right before lockdown started. And ironically, when I was in Truk in January, beginning of February, when we left there, we were one of the last ones to leave, actually. But those were the last dives I did in March. I haven't been able to get in the water since. I'm in Kiev, so there's no immediate dive sites kind of looming on the horizon. But this is kind of the summer of staycations, isn't it? So I have a lot of projects backlogged at the moment, which I'm going to be pursuing within the confines of Europe. So
I think for us, that sort of buzzword staycation is working really well on our sort of radar. Within 2 hours drive of where we live, there's plenty to do. So much to see that we haven't discovered. So we can run like a little mini expedition every weekend, whether it be doing a little reconnaissance of an area and try and find out a few to plan in the future, or just taking enough kit and equipment and a tent for the whole weekend and just go and just live out the back of the van. It's brilliant. But
it's all about perception at the end of the day. If
absolutely.
I know people don't like to be grounded and all that stuff, but instead of complaining about lockdown happened and I have to cancel my holiday to Spain or whatever, just take advantage of what you have in your backyard right now and see it as a happy alternative until things change, and they will change. This is a momentary thing in time. It's not going to stay like this forever.
No, I tell you, the biggest plus point for me, short of starting this podcast and meeting new people that I'd probably seen, like I have seen you around on the internet, never probably would have got ever chance to talk to you until, like you said, I'm booking that end of life trip to go and see some of the most phenomenal dive sites in the world.
I'm right.
But I've saved an absolute fortune, you know, because I've not been going here and doing this and doing that. I've actually managed to bank quite a bit of money. I've been fortunate to work, and be supported. You know, my wife still works, so we've been lucky in that respect, which I know not everyone has been. So I suppose that segues nicely into your employment, which is, you know, the Dirty Dozen Expeditions. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about how you started that, will you?
Yeah, sure. So my background in the diving industry in general, I think, you know, like I said, I finished, I graduated and went straight on an airplane and never kind of returned since. I spent, you know, quite a few years in Asia, just getting my recreational credentials up to speed. And then I went to quite a few places, different places in the world for training. I was in Scotland as a commercial, well, I don't know if I call it commercial diver in Scotland. We were chasing razor clams, if you're familiar with the activity. And then I was in Egypt, I think, in 2011. And that's when I started my first technical diving school called Team Blue Immersion with Jonas Samuelson and Eric Brown. And it became a quite successful outfit, which I then sold my shares in around 2015. But that was a wonderful, you know, period of my life, living in Dahab, Egypt, for 5-6 years, full time, you know, in the Blue Hole and the rest of it.
It's a terrible climate to live in, isn't it?
Well, it was pretty hard in the summer, I'll tell you that much. But it was, you know, wonderful people, a wonderful area, and just such a pure, fantastic climate to teach technical diving. Nice. You know, I don't think you could find a better environment to do your tech classes, to be honest with you. Right. But then on out, you know, there was a new chapter in my life coming up, and I decided to do as much as I could in the meantime, and did quite a fair few expeditions. And before I knew it, I found myself on a boat in Micronesia, taking care of Blue O2, our umbrella company for the Dirty Dozen expedition, their boat in Truk. So I was basically in charge of the boat with the captain. So that was an interesting and very meaningful experience that I had for 18 months in Truk. I don't know how many outsiders can say that they can have the experience of being there for such a period of time. And it's a period of time I'll never forget, because the wrecks there are nothing short of extraordinary. And even after all this time, you know, doing either 2 very long dives a day or 4 recreational ones, I'm not bored. Every time I go onto these wrecks, there's always something new to find. And I know for most people, they only get to stay there for 10 days, 2 weeks. And it's just one of those places you can go to again and again. It's just simply astonishing. Awesome. And to wrap things up a little bit, that's kind of where Dirty Dozen was born. Me and the captain, we were in the saloon. We were watching the Dirty Dozen, the war movie, if you're familiar with it. Yeah. And we were talking about, you know, if we did a liveaboard trip, what would be our dream trip that we could provide to our best friends? If we owned the boat for 10 days, what would we do? Yeah. So we obviously, with over 50 wrecks in Truk, we wrote down a list of 12 wrecks that we felt represented Truk in the best way for the people that we were inviting. So we were inviting Mod 2 CCR diver, normoxic trimix divers. So building them up on long long dives on shallow wrecks, and then do some explorations on the deeper wrecks in the end. So 12 wrecks, 12 people on a boat that takes 16. Obviously, me and the captain, we built it up with our technical know-how to accommodate the most demanding rebreather divers or open circuit divers. If you're GUE CCR, we can take care of you on that boat. There's nothing we can't handle. We got oxygen generators on board and the rest.
Wow.
Anyway, we just created that concept, invited a lot of good friends, and we did one trip. And one trip is now 40. So here we are.
Flipping heck. I suppose though, you've had that sort of cutting your teeth, graduating through all the right sort of things, haven't you? Running your technical school.
Yeah.
So you've got all that knowledge, because obviously you would have had a client base through that.
Sure.
To sort of help you understand where the difficulties can be with some customers, whether it be their demands or just their personalities and that. So you've developed that sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's been 13 years in the business now. And I mean, I remember filming people's open water classes, as a teenager, trying to sell them for a couple of quid in the evening to pay my rent, living on a small island. I mean, I remember being electrocuted underwater to take shellfish, that we sold to the Yakuza in Japan. Right. I remember being a recreational instructor, having wonderful students taking open water dives. I remember advanced trimix classes. It's all, just an accumulation to be able to bring these individuals to these remote places now.
Sounds pretty epic, mate, to be fair.
Yeah, just a wonderful time in the industry. It's a great industry. So
can you define what an expedition means to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, an expedition is something where you set out to have a goal. That's kind of number one for me. So if I take, for example, our first wreck expedition, which we did in 2011, we set out to discover the wreck of U.S. Coast Guard cutter Alexander Hamilton, which lies at 100 meters or 95 meters in the Atlantic Ocean, just off Iceland, where I come from.
Yeah.
So we knew that wreck was there. There was an oil slick. The Coast Guard had told us that they suspected this was the wreck. There's 26 souls still on board the wreck. Wow. And Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, had put his yacht, to go find it with the ROV, but we decided we wanted to do it first. So we went on the race. So there's the goal, you want to go and you want to discover something. So that's an expedition.
Yeah.
An expedition has a team. So there was obviously the three of us, me and Eric Brown and Jonas.
Yeah.
We had Chris Haslam, a few other people, lots of people on Iceland as well, taking care of us. So there's that team feel, obviously. And it's just a sense of camaraderie and adventure and challenges that make an expedition for me, for sure. I mean, we did it twice. When we went there and discovered it in 2011, we went back in 2014, did a documentary, put a memorial plaque for the fallen men, for the families of the fallen men, which we stayed in contact with for all these years. So
awesome.
You think about wreck diving and it's like, let's go down and check out this ship, what's inside, yada, yada, yada. There's such big stories behind every wreck. And that's something that I definitely learned in Truk Lagoon. We had no internet. I mean, you have a gigabyte per month, but it costs you $300. So it's not like you're streaming YouTube, let's put it that way. But I had a lot of history books and I had a lot of wrecks. And after a certain amount of time, you just start to see what immense amount of history there is behind these wrecks. There's a story behind every stone. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's not even a cliche. It really is like that. Wow. And that's what makes it interesting for me.
So where would you start if you were not who you are right now, but you could take your own advice? Or let's say you're giving it to me, and I wanted to plan an expedition, because like I said to you earlier, that that is what really interests me about diving, is getting a group of people together with a similar interest to go and discover something, or to learn something, or gain something.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you start? How would you sort of advise us? Where would we start and build to the point where we're going to get to the actual dive site as such?
I think my advice would be to first of all to find what kind of diving you're into. That was a big part of my kind of finding myself.
Yeah.
I would find myself living in Mexico for a couple of years doing the caves. There with friends, or we would be doing Oyamo mine in Finland. Doing Hell's Gate, or if you're in Iceland, or if you're in Micronesia, or if you're in Egypt doing deep diving. These are all very different disciplines of the sport, so to speak. Rebreather, open circuit. You have to find what you're really passionate about, because that's going to shine through when you do your adventure finally. But I find that these things come in chapters, so don't look too hard. Just accept what's in front of you. Like, I had some years around me that were just about caves, and that's fine, and I still love caves, but right now I'm just in like a wreck phase of my life, and I have no idea how long it's going to last, but I'm having a wonderful time.
So that makes sense, because I suppose if you enjoy it, you're going to keep doing it, aren't you? And if you don't so much have to force that to happen.
Sure. And I mean, I don't know, I can only speak for myself, but I can't be doing many things at the same time. Just putting Galapagos on our itineraries was hard for me, but then I thought, okay, hammerhead sharks, you're gonna be fine, Aaron. but like I'm so embedded in wrecks right now that just the thought of going somewhere where there wasn't a ship, I was like,
well,
what's going on
there's
here?
plenty of Chinese ships at Galapagos, isn't there?
Yeah, maybe we should make them into wrecks. That's right. But they're leaving soon. I'm very happy to.
I've not heard that. Is that true? Right?
Yeah, we put it out in our last newsletter. There was an article in the Guardian recently saying that the Chinese authorities have said that they have to leave. I think it's beginning of September.
All right, that's good. That's great news. That.
Yeah.
Let's jump back onto topic and get off politics quickly.
Yeah, sure. Maybe we cut that out.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So I've got my team together now for my exped. Because we know what kind of diving we want to do. How do you go about finding out about such a sort of an idea like that?
Oh, you mean like finding the scoop, so to speak?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's a question of who you know, isn't it? For me, it was lucky because I'm Icelandic, and we're in touch with the local Coast Guard at home, and a lot of this information is kind of open source. But being an Icelandic was certainly an advantage, right? But you'd almost have to, have a group, have a club. Obviously, you're meeting each other a couple of times a month or whatever. And you set yourself a goal that you want to find something, and then people start using their network and their contacts, and eventually somebody's, I guess, bound to stumble onto something, right? That's how it usually goes.
We did have one earlier this year planned for June. It was to Croatia, and look at there's some, they call them the secret submarine tunnels. They're not actually secret now. Everybody knows about them, but they were secret during World War II because it was a bit of a staging post for us. And, it seems quite interesting to me to go and have a look at them and develop a bit of a story for some of the dive magazines, or even as a video, for my YouTube channel. That would be my sole purpose within that. But when I hear about people such as yourself that have gone and found a vessel that's sunk, and, you go in to actually discover that and find it and report on it, or some people do like scientific research, whether it be on a particular species of marine life or whatever. I often wonder what their inspiration is, or how they come across that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I found myself one day, and this was right before I started my tech training, and I was reading a dive magazine, right? And on the very back of the magazine, there's like a full cover page, which is used for an advertisement. And Fourth Element was advertising on the back of that cover. And the photo that was on the cover was taken by Janne Suoen from Divers of the Dark, and it's that famous photo of Rebreather divers swimming out of the gates of hell in Ojamo mine in Finland.
I know which one you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
It's quite an old photo, but it's absolutely stunning to this day. And I remember seeing that photo, and the first thing that came to mind was, I'm going to do that. I don't really care what it's going to take. I am going to do that during my diving career. And that's kind of where I started meddling with tech and started getting into it, because I knew that was something that intrigued me. And surely enough, 10 plus years later, I found myself on the set filming Dive Odyssey. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And that's filmed by Janne Suoen, who took that photo. So me and Janne are good friends today, you know. So the whole thing went full circle 10 years later, right?
Wow.
Just by making that decision.
That's a cracking idea, that. I'll be honest, I would love to dive that, but it just seems such a way off in the distance for me, having only dived for 4 years. Although I think I've done quite well in the 4 years, and I'm looking at broadening my horizons at the end of this year. I've got a CCR course booked for October, so I think I'm going with the JJ.
We'll very popular unit, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I've not tried any others, but through discussions and trying to put my feelers out and try and find out what I want from it.
Yeah,
it seems suited to me.
But it seems certainly with what you're doing at the moment, getting to know all these people in the diving industry and having to do some research on them before you speak with them, that you wouldn't come with that moment where you think, okay, I want to do that. How do I do that?
Well, it's kind of, if I wasn't doing what we are doing now and I hadn't had certain opportunities come up recently, I reckon it'd be 2 or 3 more years, perhaps, or even maybe 5, to look at getting a rebreather, because of the kind of diving we are doing. But sometimes opportunity knocks at your door, and if you don't have a particular skill set or qualification or practice, when that comes, you might get left behind. So I think if I jump on that opportunity now and build up my time on the unit, if and when I ever would need it, I'm in.
The thing about 2020, all bad things aside, is that there's never been a better time to get into rebreather dive. The education materials have never been better, and the units themselves are so technologically advanced from what they were just merely 10-15 years ago. They've changed so much, and a lot of the things have become very uniformed. We have RISA now. There's so many advancements within the rebreather industry that have made it more accessible, easier to learn, and more safe, most importantly. Because I can't begin to tell you how rebreather diving changed my life, especially from the point of exploration, just because with open circuit, you run out of gas. And when you're on a shallow wreck in Truk, at 20 meters, and you think, I can do this on a twin set for this long, or I can go on a 2.5-3 hour dive on the rebreather.
Wow.
Which one are you gonna pick? It's just that sense of freedom all day long. You can't beat it. You just can't.
I think the only downside to that 2 or 3 hour dive for me would be not being able to get a brew.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've managed to do that in Ojamo in Finland.
Yeah, took your flask down.
Well, we had a habitat, didn't we? We did the last couple hours of decompression or whatever, last hour.
Hey.
And Laura Tumonen, God bless her, she was one of the support divers, and she would come under the ice into the habitat and bring us A warm flask of brew. There you go.
Mate,
And
I was hoping you were going to say a McDonald's. Oh, I'd
no,
have roared if she'd have brought you a McDonald's. That'd have been
she
amazing.
brought us an iPad as well, connected
Really
to internet. We go on Facebook.
awesome.
No, it was pretty hardcore.
Sounds it,
That Finnish crew knows what they're doing, man.
mate. That's brilliant. That's
It
awesome.
was hilarious.
Right, so let's get back onto your business now a little bit. So
All right.
recently, I think it must have been early on in the lockdown. We watched, there was a series called Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Now I'm not 100% the year that it happened, but it must have been around my very early years, around 1980 sort of then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
the year I was born, 1986.
well, I was born in 1980, so I'd have been 6 years old, so clearly don't remember it. I've obviously known of it for years, but
Sure.
watching, it was like a drama that was
Yeah,
on,
it's a great show.
and it was absolutely phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And then to see, when I'm doing some research on you, you actually take people there. It shocked me that you can go for a start. I thought it's going to be horrific for like a million years. You won't be able to ever go.
Yeah, no, I got lots of stories about all that. I mean, I actually started having some like ethical concerns, like self-reflection, this year, thinking, wait, what am I doing? I find myself, in a post-war zone in Truk Lagoon. I'm in a nuclear test site in Bikini Atoll where the deadliest weapons on Earth are being tested, and I'm in Chernobyl. I mean, what is the
So
common
when you say
here?
end of life trip, it quite literally could be, couldn't it?
No, but to be fair, I've always been kind of an urbex personality. I like abandoned spaces.
Yeah, I get that.
I've always, like the computer game Fallout. Do you remember the one? I used to play it for hours when I was younger. It's my favorite thing to do. And I've just always been fascinated by the concept of radiation. So when I got to combine diving, wrecks, radiation all together, that was the pinnacle for me.
Yeah.
And that was where Bikini came along, right? Because Operation Crossroads is one hell of a story. But putting all that aside, when I spent a couple of seasons in Bikini, obviously, my fiancée, she's Ukrainian, and we're in Ukraine now for a little while, and I thought this is too good of an opportunity to miss. I wanted to go there the last 10 years, and the show kind of reignited that passion. And I thought, oh my God, before all these donkeys show up from all over the world after seeing the show, I gotta go now, but I don't want to go with a selfie stick on a bus with 50 people taking a selfie by the Ferris wheel. That's not how I do things. So I managed to find this guy Alex who's lived in the zone or around the zone for 15 years. That's all he does. And his wife is a professional dosimetrist. And he took me and a couple of mates for a 3-day excursion in the zone. So we were camping, in Chernobyl.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was incredible when we went to all the surrounding villages in the exclusion zone. Yeah. Spent plenty of time in Pripyat, and we went on a 5-hour tour of the Chernobyl power plant. We were in the control rooms.
Yeah, I saw them.
Yeah, exactly. Where the whole thing obviously happened. We went way deeper than I would have ever imagined. I was, the boys I brought along were pretty hardcore. Yeah. And we were all shaking in our boots. I'll be the first one to admit it. It was scary as hell. But it's an experience I'll never forget. And simply for the reason that when I came back, I was emotionally exhausted. Every single feeling that I had, if it was sadness, happiness, excitement, fascination, it was all like drained. I just needed like a week to recover.
The radiation.
Awesome. But it was also an invaluable educational opportunity because, as a scuba diver first and wreck diver, my knowledge surrounding radiation, was not particularly high. Even going to a place like Bikini, and being able to spend an extended amount of time with Alex now, and him having this all-encompassing knowledge about all the different facets of radiation, what is dangerous, what is not, has just given me a completely different outlook on the whole thing.
Wow.
And it's been invaluable for me in my own safety as well. And it's especially interesting looking at it now in COVID times, because you're walking around Chernobyl, and we're walking around, and all of a sudden Alex goes, "Stop! Don't touch that." Don't drink that water. He is so abrupt. But it's like walking around an invisible forest fire. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna burn your fingers. It's kind of the same like COVID now. We're all fumbling in this invisible forest fire that's everywhere. And that was one of the more valuable experiences I learned.
Well, yeah, I've got two questions for you then, specifically about Chernobyl, because these are probably urban myths, so you could probably just discount them straight away.
Sure.
Is there literally silence everywhere? Like nothing is, like no birds, no butterflies? Is it dead?
No, everywhere? I think Chernobyl is quite alive, to be honest with you. They got wild boars, they got foxes. I mean, you got more dangers from less danger from radiation, and more danger being attacked by wolves. In the
no way
in the
it's
forest.
Like nature finds a way, doesn't it, to always come back?
It's teeming with life. It's completely taken over, which is fascinating in itself to witness. And it's a especially Pripyat. How the trees are just hugging the entire buildings. And it's fascinating. Nothing short of fascinating.
And then the other question I've got is, I saw on one of your pictures of being in Chernobyl, there's it looks, I don't know if it's a sign or painting on the wall, but it kind of looks a bit like a shadow on the wall. But I've heard the radiation was so quick that it sort of scorched people's shadows on the wall. Is that just rubbish?
I think that's something you would expect from a nuclear explosion. I don't think that's something that would happen from the power plant exploding. I'd be very surprised if that was the case. But I've definitely heard these accounts. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened, that's certainly something that's been said.
I've probably got my stuff mixed up there. Then we'll scratch that out as well.
No, but it's funny that you say that, because on that picture there is that painting of the guy, right? And that's somebody's graffiti. That's just somebody playing around with the concept, right?
Yeah. Have they finished putting? They were putting the last sort of thing I saw before, or the only thing I'd really seen.
New safe confinement, yeah.
Yeah, that big sarcophagus or whatever. They put it over the top. Is that all done now? And they started taking it to bits?
Yeah, no, it's covering it completely. God knows how many hundreds of millions, billions that cost. A lot, but it's finished.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's great.
How does that relate then to Bikini Atoll, where clearly there's been a lot of that kind of testing? That's nuclear and radiation in many respects go hand in hand, don't they? So is there any sort of fallout? I don't mean that, it's a pun, that, isn't it? But is there any sort of obvious detrimental effects left over there from what they were doing, the testing wise?
I think the common denominator, and this is something that people witness when they're there, because we're all about education, right? So when people go to Truk, what's the first thing they think? They think, oh, bombs, guns, tanks, cars, ships. We're gonna see everything, and they will, and it's fascinating. But what they find, for example, in Truk, there was 4,000 people that died in Operation Hailstone. There's plenty of dead bodies still underwater. I mean, they're not on display like they were maybe 30 years ago, and many of them have been taken out by the Japanese government, but they're still there. And the chances of you coming across a bone or even a skull are very real. So people come out and leave this trip with that human factor. They understand the ramifications of war. And I come from a pacifist country, right? So it was a very important lesson for me to learn firsthand about the dangers and the horrors of war. That kind of worked its way into Bikini, where it wasn't a war operation. It was post-war, and it was a test, and it was, a display to show the Axis powers and everyone, for that matter, that if you mess with us again, this is what's going to happen to you. I mean, they took Prince Eugen, the pride of the Nazis back in the day, and the Nagato from the Japanese, and blew, threw a nuke on top of it. I mean, how clear do you have to be? But I was in a taxi in Salt Lake City a few years ago, and the taxi driver, we were talking about, I don't know how Bikini came up, and he said, Bikini? Did you say Bikini? I was in Bikini Atoll. We were like, no way. So he was in Operation Crossroads.
Yeah.
And the first thing he said, oh yeah, I got cancer. And I was like, shit. I mean, there was 30,000, 40,000 people in that operation. And I mean, God knows how many of them are sick today because of that test. And the inhabitants of Bikini, they've been displaced, ever since. They've never been able to return. Then the same, obviously, with the people living in Pripyat and in the 30-kilometer exclusion zone. When Pripyat was being evacuated, when Chernobyl happened, there was this, bus coming through the streets, and the speaker was saying "Pneumonia, pneumonia," which is attention, attention. And they were saying, okay, just bring your, slippers and coat. Don't worry about bringing big luggage. It's just a temporary thing. People left their passports, their jewelry and stuff, and they haven't returned to this day. So, it shows the horror of the capabilities that we have, and I think it's an important thing for everybody to learn, and it just shows a different aspect of our diving experience.
Well, I've said this quite often. What I really am passionate about the diving is there's so much to learn. It's not just about putting a reg in your mouth and Boyle's law and finding that sort of stability in the water. There's everything, the history behind it, as in why we're doing what we're doing, then where we're going, seeing what we're seeing, and the fact that scuba diving is too cute to live in Ukraine to then go and find out more about just something that's nothing to do with diving, but such an interesting, fact-finding mission for you, and then you can turn it into a business, I suppose, as well, can't you?
Yeah, I mean, everything about this business has just been, the core of it is just bringing my friends over to see it, because I'm just stumbling on all these great destinations at the moment, and I feel it's my moral obligation to show everyone.
I get that feel, yeah.
And another part of the whole concept is, I want to dive with a lot of the people that I look up to. So, if it's Mark Powell that wrote Deco for Divers, or if it's Richard Lundgren from Global Underwater Explorers, Jill Heinerth, I can go on and on and on. Yeah. That's also a part of the business model, right? We have a special guest on every trip. So people can go diving with their diving heroes. We have, the special guests have lectures in the evenings. Wow. They take them diving during the day. It's about creating that unique experience, because I'm a firm believer in, if you're going to go that far and spend all that money and all that time, all that effort, God knows if you're coming back, you better do it right and have the best experience you can get. That's what we're all about.
Mate, that's a very much probably the biggest USP that you've got there, isn't it? Is that you're doing it right, and you're going to far outweigh everybody's expectations by having that kind of experience.
It didn't start as a business to make money. It just started out as something that we were really passionate about. And that's what we always have been.
I think if that's what shines through and money comes second, you'll always be busy. Yeah. I run my business like that. Customer satisfaction is key, because that breeds more work. If people like what you do and like you, they'll re-employ you.
It's just karma, man. You do good, you get good. That's all it is.
If I was to choose a trip with you, obviously you have several destinations, but if I was torn between Truk Lagoon or Bikini Atoll, give me a bit of a synopsis of the difference between the two if I wasn't sure which would be more for me?
So usually I do like an hour presentation on the difference between truck and bikini, and obviously we don't have time for that right
Episode
now.
2, how you distinguish between Truk Lagoon and Bikini Atoll.
But I'll try and summarize it into like a 2-minute answer.
Okay.
But to make it into a really short segment, Truk Lagoon and Bikini Atoll are two wreck paradises that are in the middle of the Pacific. They're almost neighbors. They're not very far from each other. The Marshall Islands and the Federated States of Micronesia. In Truk Lagoon, you have the biggest concentration of wrecks on the planet. There's 50 plus wrecks in a relatively small lagoon in Micronesia, right? And that's something that happened during World War II in something called Operation Hailstone. Bikini Atoll, on the other hand, which is in the neighboring Marshall Islands, is an atoll, as from the name, is where the Americans conducted a test called Operation Crossroads after the Second World War. And it's where the American Navy decided to test nuclear weapons on an armada, right? Yeah. To see what the effects of that could be. Because they wanted originally to do it in Truk before they did Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So Truk was actually supposed to be nuked. Not many people know that. But here you go. They did Hiroshima, did Nagasaki, and then they were, oh, damn it, what happens on ships? They decided to do it in Bikini. And so the difference lying in those two is in Truk, the 9 out of 10 vessels, and there's 50 of them plus, are merchant vessels. And they're going to be, 70% of those are going to be in recreational diving range. Bikini Atoll, you only have 10 wrecks, and 9 out of 10 are Navy vessels. And they're all pretty much in technical diving range. So that's kind of the most clear-cut difference I can tell between the two. And the best kind of top tip I can give to any listeners out there thinking about doing either, do Truk first. You could be a Mod 3 CCR, like full trimix CCR diver, and I'd still tell you to do Truk first, because I believe the overall experience becomes that much better when you start with Truk and kind of get into the wreck paradise in that area. I
know we spoke earlier about how you started up the Dirty Dozen expeditions, but so you've got your 12 there of the 50, but I still don't know how you would choose to only dive 12.
Yeah, it's hard. Our rec list in Truk is never the same. I mean, in Bikini, it's because we can cover everything, right?
Yeah.
But in Truk, we have a handful of wrecks that we can juggle, that we can reject
so and
bring in. But we listen to the people. It's not a dictatorship. It's a limited democracy. People have a say, and obviously we listen to. Some people are, huge submarine fanatics, or some people like oilers, or if they like destroyers. We just listen to them during dinner and do what we listen to.
Happy days. When you said earlier you like the kind of abandoned spaces, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast today, and they were it was in Greenland, and there was an old US sort of outpost, during the Cold War, that was there to sort of, if any Russian missiles were to come over.
Yeah, sure.
It would be their early warning system, and because of the money to just disable it, they've just walked out, left. Even the covers were still on the beds, the pillows are still there. There's peanut butter on the shelf, he said, one of them.
Yeah.
And that'd be fascinating just to go and have a sort of mooch around that. It'd be ace.
But in Seattle, they still have the ICBM complex or whatever from the Cold War.
No.
And it's flooded, so it's diveable. I think they might have closed it just like this year, and I am devastated because I was planning to go. I'll send you the link after the show.
I'll come with you. I'll be your buddy, mate. No problem. I'll pay for us both. Just get it sorted.
Because you're like you climb into this complex, and then you're swimming in the silos, in the command centers.
Yeah.
It's like 30 meters.
Oh, that's perfect. Let's get it done.
That's great.
We'll meet up, mate. We'll have a brew and then we'll crack on. We'll get it done. Ace.
You remind me a lot about Andy Torbin, actually.
Well, I have spoke to him quite a bit, actually, about certain things about getting my rebreather, and he's put me onto different people with qualifications and that. And I don't know him. I've never met him. But I've certainly spoke to him an awful lot. He's just a busy guy, isn't he? So
nice guy, yeah.
Yeah. So what have you got coming up that you know you can do?
Well, we have a few projects coming up. Before lockdown, we got our hands on some cinema equipment for underwater. So that's a big deal for us, and we wanna start getting some hours with it in the water.
Yeah.
Before we take it to the big places. We're actually supposed to already taking it to Galapagos, but here we go. I mean, but that's a first world problem. I'm not gonna complain too much about that.
Nah. It must be killing you if you've been out the water since March. That must be pretty detrimental to just your own sort of mental well-being. Do you reckon?
No, actually, no. I would say the opposite. I mean, not to say that I'm happy any of this happened, but I was planning on this, planning on staying still. So I knew my last expedition of the first quarter of this year was in March.
Yeah.
And when I finished, I was gonna stay dry until July.
All right.
Because you just need it sometimes. Sometimes your body just needs to recover, to be honest. I get
that, yeah. Absolutely.
Especially when you're doing deep diving again and again and again, you just need some rest. And there are just, when diving has been such a huge part of your life for so long, it can be fun to try other things as well on the side, you know, almost like a cheeky holiday, you know?
Yeah.
And not to include diving for once, but because you do it all the time.
I suppose
and then when you come back to it,
you're love for it, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. Because you don't want to tire it out. You want to come back to it and be happy. And that's possibly my biggest fear of all. Because if I ever get bored with what I'm doing right now, I might as well put the regs on the shelf or put it on eBay, because then it's over.
Yeah.
Because if you cannot get tired of what I'm doing right now. One of the things I started doing a lot while I was in lockdown, because I'm such a geek, is 3D printing. And I started to see some insane parallels from that and diving.
Yeah.
Because you need to be extremely fixated on what you're doing to be successful. That you will stumble at infinity amount of times before you understand what you're doing, just like diving. I mean, there were so many. So I was well prepped, because I knew from lots of people advising me from the forums that there's going to be a lot of tears, but I was ready.
So let me get this right then. So it could, from my understanding, it's basically a sort of big 3D thing, a big sort of big printer, and it comes on a big coil, does it? The plastic, and it sort of shoots it out. So if you make something wrong, is that it? It just goes in the bin, or can you recycle that plastic? No,
you can't recycle it. It's very rarely it happens in the end or the middle. It's mostly in the beginning where things go wrong. But it's all about getting it to start. And you can fail 15 times before you even get off the ground. And it takes forever. But yeah, it's a very interesting.
What sort of, probably kind of off the concept of why we were even talking, but it does interest me. So I'll ask you anyway. But what made you get into that?
I think mainly I thought it was I mean, we're in lockdown, and you need to be doing something indoors. That just seemed like a natural thing you could spend a lot of time on, keep yourself busy in the hours where you're not working. You know, I knew, for example, that I like giving my customers knickknacks. You know, so when they come on the boat, there's maybe, you know, there's a handwritten letter on their bed. You know, maybe with a book and a little present. And the knickknacks that I'd given, you know, it was getting tired. So I thought, okay, I'll make my own knickknacks.
Yeah.
And now I can. So like I can make, you know, covers for the shearwaters, or I can make covers for the heads-up displays, or I can make all kinds of diving equipment, even put my branding on it, and give it to them. So you can make anything.
Yeah,
so that's what I like about it.
That's awesome.
You just have to use your brain, which I'm not very good at.
Thanks very much for your time. I do appreciate you giving up a bit of your evening, and it's quite late there for you, isn't it? You're a couple of hours in front of us, so
it's 10:30.
Yeah.
I mean, time is relative during COVID. It doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. So
I started working at 11 a.m. this morning after the gym. It's like no need to get up at 8. What's the point? I mean, what am I missing?
I've not been to the gym and was up at 8. But I could do with getting the gym, to be fair.
But then I just work until like 10 instead in the evening,
I'm saying. Well, Mega Mate, right, take it easy. Have a good evening.
You too, buddy.
Take it easy. See you soon. So that brings us to an end of episode 26 with my friend Aron Arngrimsson. Links to all the things we discussed are in the podcast notes. You've been listening to Are You a Scuba Diver? Fancy a Brew podcast with me, Andy the Northern Diver. And you can find more scuba related content on my YouTube channel. The link is in the podcast notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review. If there's someone or something you'd like us to discuss, let us know via our Facebook page. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one.